When you share your food, you share your heart. So what's on your table this holiday season? Save on your festive feast at Kroger with delicious deals on all the holiday classics. Or wow the crowd with something new, like a quinoa stuffed butternut squash. It's sure to add a pop of color to your spread. How about a sweet potato casserole with a crunchy oat streusel topping, made with care for the sweet tooth and the savory tooth? With Kroger, fill your table with love and watch as your guests' hearts get as full as their bellies. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're diving into a topic I know a lot of you have been requesting, tech PM interviews. You know those really competitive product manager roles at like Google, Amazon, Facebook, all those big companies?
Yeah, they're tough for sure.
Right. So to help us break it all down, we're taking a close look at this YouTube video, cracking the FAANG PM interview, led by this Meta product lead, Emmanuel. And let me tell you, this guy's been through it. Over 100 applications, he said, something like 90 rejections.
Wow.
Before finally landing his role.
That's wild. It really shows how important it is to be resilient, right? To not give up.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something he really emphasizes in the video. Like each rejection, instead of being a setback, he saw it as a learning opportunity. You know, to kind of analyze what went wrong and improve for the next one.
Right. And I think it's so important, that mindset shift.
Yeah, totally. Instead of getting discouraged, he used it as fuel. Now, getting into the actual content of the video, he really digs deep into what these companies are looking for in PM candidates. And maybe surprisingly, it's not all about being a coding whiz.
Yeah, technical skills are obviously important, but like you said, it's almost assumed at a certain point.
Right, they expect some baseline, but it seems like what they really care about is how you think, you know, your problem-solving skills, how well you can communicate your ideas.
Exactly. Like he talks about structured thinking, clear communication. Can you put yourself in the customer's shoes, understand what they need, and then, this is key, translate that understanding into actual product solutions?
And he uses this phrase, I think it's product sense. What does that actually mean in the context of these interviews?
It's a good question. So product sense, I think the way he explains it, is all about having this deep understanding of what makes a product really work, what makes it great, like identifying what users need, maybe even needs they don't even realize they have yet, anticipating trends in the market.
So it's kind of like having your finger on the pulse of what users want.
Yes. And then, of course, being able to design solutions that are actually doable.
Okay, so it's not just about coming up with cool ideas. It has to be grounded in reality.
Exactly. And it's not always easy.
So how do you actually show that you have this product sense in an interview? Like, how do you prove it?
Well, Emmanuel talks about these really specific types of questions that they ask, and they often use these hypothetical situations like, okay, design a grocery delivery service for, say, senior citizens, or imagine you're integrating a dating feature into TikTok.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm already getting nervous just thinking about this.
Right. So he says the key is not to panic, right? It's not about having some perfect, brilliant answer. They really want to see your thought process. Like, can you take this big problem, this complex idea, and break it down into smaller, manageable steps?
So it's more about how you approach it, not necessarily the solution itself.
Exactly. And that's where, having frameworks can be helpful. He talks about this step-by-step process. Like, first, you ask clarifying questions.
So you make sure you understand the problem before you even try to solve it.
Right. And then you think about the company's goals, who they're targeting. You really need that solid foundation.
Like building a house, you got to have a blueprint.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. So you've got your blueprint, you understand the problem, now what? How do you actually come up with ideas for a solution?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. This is where, as Emmanuel describes it, user empathy comes in. Like, you really have to put yourself in the shoes of the people who are going to be using this product.
Right. What do they want? What do they need?
What are their pain points? What are they trying to achieve? You have to really understand that before you can even begin to design something that's going to be useful and successful.
So it's kind of like, I don't know if this is too cheesy, but like walk a mile in their shoes. But you're designing a product for their feet.
Exactly. And once you have a good grasp on that, then you can start thinking about solutions. And he's a big proponent of thinking outside the box. Like, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Don't be afraid to come up with something truly new.
So you're not just trying to recreate something that already exists, you're trying to innovate, right?
Yeah. You want to find a fresh approach, a better way of doing things. But, and this is important, it can't just be some crazy idea that could never actually work in the real world. It has to be grounded in reality.
Right. You can't just say, teleportation and call it a day.
Exactly. You have to be able to back it up. Why is this the best solution? How will it benefit the users? Is it actually feasible?
So it's like finding that balance between being creative and being strategic at the same time.
Exactly. And I think that's part of what makes product management so interesting. It's that combination of like left brain, right brain thinking.
And speaking of interesting, I wanted to ask you about something else he mentioned in the video, the whole mock interview thing. He did over 40 mock interviews to prepare.
Yeah, he went all in, and honestly, it's not unheard of, especially when you're aiming for these top-tier companies.
Okay, so 40 mock interviews later, what did he learn? What's the takeaway for someone like me who maybe doesn't love the interview process?
Well, he emphasizes how valuable they are for a couple of key reasons. First, just getting comfortable with the format. Like anything else, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
Yeah, get those nerves out of the way before the actual interview.
Exactly. And the second thing is feedback. He talks about recording his mock interviews, watching them back, getting feedback from mentors, from peers.
So you're not just going through the motions, you're actively trying to improve each time.
Exactly. He even mentions applying to companies he wasn't that interested in just to get more interview practice.
Wow, dedication. Okay, so we talked about product sense, but he also mentions other types of interview questions, like estimation questions. What are those?
Ah, yes, those. Those are designed to see how you think on your feet. Like, can you make reasonable guesses with limited information?
Give me an example, I'm curious.
Sure, a classic one is like, how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? Obviously, no one just knows that off the top of their head.
Not unless they've done a very specific census.
Right. But you can use what you do know, like population size, maybe how often pianos need to be tuned, things like that, to come up with a reasonable estimate.
So it's like a logic puzzle disguised as an interview question.
Yeah, kind of. And it's about demonstrating your ability to think it through, even if you don't have all the information.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
And what about those, behavioral questions, where they ask you about specific situations from your past?
The tell me about a time you failed question. Yeah, those can be tough, but they're really a chance for you to show self-awareness, how you learned from mistakes, things like that.
So how do you even prepare for that? Like, should I just start listing out all my biggest work disasters?
That's one way. But he suggests using the STAR method for structuring your answers.
STAR method. Remind me what that is again.
Yeah, so it stands for situation, task, action, result. It's basically a framework for telling stories in a way that highlights your skills and experience. So you set the scene, describe the task you were given, the action you took, and the outcome.
Oh, right. Yeah, the STAR method. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's all about showing, not just telling. But, easier said than done when you're in the hot seat.
Right, for sure. And that's why, like he says, you really have to practice. And not just memorize these frameworks, but actually internalize them, make them second nature.
So you're kind of training your brain to think in a structured way, even when you're stressed.
Exactly. It's like learning a new language. At first you're translating everything in your head, but eventually you just start to think in that language.
Okay, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot here, frameworks, different types of questions, the importance of practice. But I want to circle back to those product sense questions for a second. Can we maybe walk through one together just to really solidify that framework he talked about?
Sure, absolutely. How about we go back to that TikTok dating feature one? That was a good one.
Yeah, that one was interesting. Because you don't really think of TikTok as a dating app, do you? It's like dance challenges, funny videos, not exactly romance central.
Right, and that's what makes it a good question, right? It forces you to think differently. Okay, so using the framework, what's the first step?
Clarifying questions.
Right, exactly. Like, what exactly do they even mean by a dating feature? What are we talking about here?
Like, are they trying to compete with Tinder and Bumble? Or is it more about, like, connecting people with shared interests?
Yeah, good question. And how does this align with TikTok's overall mission? We have to understand that too.
Makes sense. So once we have that clear in our minds, what's next?
Thinking about the target user, who is this feature actually for?
So we're not just thinking about every single TikTok user, but like who specifically would be using this dating feature?
Right. What are their demographics? What are their pain points with existing dating apps?
Like maybe they're tired of just swiping left and right, or they want something that feels more genuine, less superficial.
Exactly. So now, the fun part, brainstorming solutions. How could we actually use TikTok's existing features to create a unique dating experience?
Okay, so we're not just adding a Find Your Match button and calling it a day. We have to think about how it all integrates.
Right, like what if users could create short video profiles? Or use live streams to connect in real time. There are a lot of possibilities.
This is actually making me want to use this hypothetical dating app. Okay, this has been amazing. I feel like I have a much better understanding of not just how to approach these interviews, but also how to think like a product manager.
Yeah, and I think that's the key takeaway here. These skills, these ways of thinking, they're valuable even outside of the interview context.
Totally. Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, we want to leave you all with something to think about. Think about a product that you use every day, something you either love or maybe even one you absolutely hate. And ask yourself, what makes it work? Or why doesn't it work? Who are the users? And could you design a better solution? That right there is product sense in action. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you in the next deep dive.